like I was just saying, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining today. This is AIA Dallas's Design Award Common App Introduction, or the Common App Clinic. You can call it whatever you want. We're basically just going to go through the Common App today. We're going to use Hope Lodge, which was a winner last year, as our case study, and kind of demystify, just want to take away any anxiety that there is around the Common App, and leave time to answer questions toward the end of the presentation. So we are recording, so we're just asking everyone to mute and then put your questions in the chat. And if you don't want to be on camera, feel free to turn your camera off. My name is Beth Brant. I'm an architect at DSGN, and I have been on COTE with Tori for a long time now. And last year we got the COTE Texas going at the Texas Society of Architects, and I was helping with getting the Common App going for the Texas Society of Architects Design Awards last year. And then also for AIA Dallas, it was an option last year and this year's requirement. So we just want to make sure that we have all the resources available to you all in case you have any questions about how to go about doing this. Tori, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. For those that don't know me, I'm Tori Wickard. I'm an architect at Perkins & Will, and like Beth said, I'm a member of COTE and the Texas Materials Initiative, and have submitted multiple projects in the past for the design awards. And I'm going to be presenting on the Hope Lodge project, like Beth mentioned, and I'm about to submit it tomorrow, actually, for AIA National. So I could speak a little bit to how the Common App is a little bit different for AIA National, but pretty similar.
So our agenda today is we're going to go through a little bit of the background and how it's related to the design excellence framework. Talk, of course, what is the Common App, go through that a little bit. And then we're going to, like I said, we're going to use the case study of Hope Lodge, which is AIA Dallas, a design award winner last year, and also the framework for excellence, for design excellence. Go through those simultaneously, go through those together. So you're going to see examples from COTE top 10 winners and from Hope Lodge. And then we're going to leave time at the end to go through the Common App itself and answer any questions you may have. So the best resource, one of the best resources, is actually the framework for design excellence on the AIA website. It has, this is a great resource for everyone. It has all 10 measures, and it has everything that we're going to show today is coming almost straight from this website. And there's example projects, questions to ask yourselves. So if you're going through the Common App, and they are very close related, if you have any questions, Mike first said, go to this website and you'll kind of quickly understand what they're asking for. So what is the Common App? The Common App is a suite of consistent project data entry fields that cover both general project information and simple metrics formats. What it does is it's a way for everybody to have the same information, the same product data. You enter that, and then there's a spider graph that comes up, and it kind of gives the jury a high level view of the project's performance from a holistic standpoint, not just energy, not just water, from a holistic perspective. How is the project doing wise, sustainability wise? So if there is no perfect project, but in a perfect world, if everything was truly a perfect sustainable project, this would be a complete decagon. And you can see that it varies as for project to project.
And I'll add too about that, as you enter information into the Excel file, you'll see the spider graph start to change. And it's actually a very good way, if you know your project is like really strong on the measure of well-being, but you're not getting that white line to come out here to the end, it's a very good way to kind of back check the information you've input into the spreadsheet, so you can determine if you've entered something maybe in error.
Right, that's a good point. And so why are we doing this? The first reason would be that it's a national initiative for AIA, and it's also going to number 3. It's part of the AIA National Strategic Plan. And it's also part of TXA's strategic plan and indirectly part of AI Dallas's strategic plan. The second reason would be that it's the jurors actually have asked, are we doing the Common App? They want to see this. So that's something that we responded to for TXA and also now with AI Dallas. And the fourth reason is that COTE National has adopted the Common App for awards alignment. And I'm going to explain what that means in a little bit. Oh, right here.
Is this in the way, this bar up here?
No, I don't see anything.
Okay.
So this is kind of wordy, but just hitting the highlights. It's a way to level the playing field for anyone submitting a design award. So whether you're submitting the award, like Tori said, for national or local or state, everybody's on the same playing field. Everybody's looking at the same metrics. And it makes if your firm is planning on doing multiple applications, that you only have to do it this once, and then you can use that for the various applications you plan to submit. The big takeaway I want you all to understand today is that this is already a precedent in many state chapters and local chapters. San Antonio is one of the first ones in the state of Texas to started the Common App. It's been optional for a couple of years running now, but it's mandatory in Austin, El Paso, I believe, and now Dallas. In the state-wise, you can see where all the states, Colorado, California, and then other local cities across the United States has adopted this. All that to say is this is now kind of becoming the new normal, and that is why, of course, the jurors are asking them to see it. So what you should know, this is replaces, we used to have a sustainability statement that you would submit for the Dallas Awards. That this is going to replace that. So you don't need to worry about the sustainability statement anymore. It is a requirement. So the Common App is an Excel sheet, and that must be submitted along with the other design requirements, the images. And then thirdly, I just want to say, fill out as much as you can. You don't have to fill out everything. You have to fill out everything, even if it's just not applicable. If it doesn't apply, just write it doesn't apply. But fill in every blank. And then there's lots of resources on the Design Awards website right now. So if you haven't already, you could download the Common App from the awards website. There's also a video explanation that goes into pretty detailed as to how to fill out the Common App itself. We're of course going to be doing that again today. And then we're going to post this in addition to the San Antonio one on the website after today. Let's see if there's missing anything on that. I think the last part just wanted to mention that the AI is coming from AI National, that the Common App for Awards alignment memo is also available on the website. So if you're wondering, why are we doing this? You can download that. So these are the principles of design excellence that we're going to be going through in detail today. And y'all can read, so I'll let y'all move forward. Go ahead, Tori.
Okay, so I'm going to be talking about the project that I wrapped up, I think it was last year. And this is the Richard M. Schultz Family Foundation Hope Lodge. And it is essentially a free lodging and amenities for adult cancer patients that are traveling more than 40 miles from home to undergo treatment in the Houston area. So this is very close to MD Anderson. And the design concept here seeks to develop a building as a sanctuary, providing refuge and a sense of rejuvenation and hope. It helps to generate the security and the camaraderie necessary to promote the healing process. So everybody that is staying at the Hope Lodge is either a cancer patient or their caregiver. So, and this particular lodge has 64 suites. It's the largest of all the Hope Lodges, which is a kind of a national program that the American Cancer Society has to provide this free lodging across the United States. And this is the largest of all the lodges. Because of the nature of the program, careful consideration was given to the specification of healthy and natural building materials. And I'm going to touch on that in just a bit, but also advanced mechanical and water filtrations systems were specified in order to ensure a healthier built environment. And you'll see as I go through some of the images that the healing power of nature is readily apparent through the immersion of the building around this central healing garden space. The lodge is meant to act as a home away from home. And the cancer patients and their caregivers have access to a guest suite, complete with a private restroom, a bedroom with individual beds, clean linens, a cozy living area. There's a communal kitchen at the lodge with, it's a place for cancer patients to come and find healing through the guest interaction and just be able to bond with others going through similar cancer journeys. And I'll show you a little bit about each of those program elements as we go through the presentation.
Thanks, Ray. So for each of these measures, we're going to have an introduction slide, and it's going to talk about the measure itself. If you can only do a couple things, these are some of the things you could look at. And then we're going to have a little case study off to the side, or just an introduction as to what this was. So everyone that I'm going to show from these introduction measure slides is a COTE Top 10 winner. And I tried to find examples from Texas firms or local projects in the hot, humid climates, so that we have kind of some additional examples in addition to Hope Lodge. So design for integration is thinking about good design that elevates beauty and function and balance. And if you could only do a couple of things, could you design the building to lift the spirit and delight the senses? And could you have a kickoff meeting with all the key stakeholders? So sometimes that's not just the owners, sometimes that's going to be the users or the community, et cetera. And this is an example of the Josie Pavilion by Lake Plato in Decatur, Texas. And it fully embraces and expresses the owner's mission of the prairie and the watershed restoration through a meeting and education center that is in itself restorative, engaging users and experiencing a space that is passively conditioned and fully integrated with the local weather and conditions. It was also the only living building fully certified commercial project in the state of Texas.
So when I was filling out the Common App, I was a little confused as to what design for integration means. So that this is just like a reminder to go back and look at the AIA framework for design excellence and read exactly what they say to them integration is. So in my mind, this measure is really about creating a central design concept, what we refer to as a partie. And that is the guiding principle throughout the entire design process. So additionally, the project should establish some goals around performance and ensure that all the stakeholders are on board with those goals. And that kind of goes back to this point of having the kickoff meeting with all the key stakeholders. And so on this project, the design team worked very carefully with the director of construction and building operations for American Cancer Society to establish and uphold those priorities throughout the life of the project. And then we held additional meetings with the facility manager to ensure the day-to-day needs were met through the design. The management and operations team were provided with training to ensure that all the building systems that were, somewhat unique and specialized on this project, but we wanted to ensure that they were being used effectively. And then we had even met with a family that had undergone cancer treatment at the Mayo Clinic, and they had valuable feedback to provide regarding their challenges of traveling away from home to receive cancer treatment. So when we were filling out the Common App, they ask you to select the 3 design measures that the project really embodies. And so what we selected for the project are wellness, energy, and water. And then those objectives, wellness, energy, and water, all of the stakeholders were in agreement about these measures, and we were able to use them as, really a way to make decisions throughout the life of the project, or prioritize decisions that were made, and make sure that they always went back to those three: wellness, energy, and water. And you can see here that, again, this approach was dominantly about a holistic well-being. And so our response to the design really is about like supporting innovative care and providing refuge for the families. So you can see in the floor plan that it encourages healing to not only take place on the outside of the building in that healing garden, but also on the inside by generating a sense of hope and tranquility. So all the community focused programmatic elements are located kind of on the perimeter of the ground floor area, allowing the building to focus inward toward the healing garden. And then we have a meditation space, which is indicated with the number 8 there, which is the only programmatic element that breaks form and emerges into the healing garden. So it allows guests to immerse themselves into this restorative space and bathe in natural light. And so to me, this is an example of beauty and function and balance, which is language that, again, is on the AIA's website. We worked with our landscape architect, Hawker, and we created a journey of contemplative paths through elevated vegetated spaces with little places of respite throughout. You can kind of see those benches and monument signs there that allow people to stop and reflect. And then we have a large live oak tree in the center that represents strength and longevity. It stretches up through the overhead trellis to the sky above. The design that we worked on with Hawker, it focuses on both native and adaptive landscape for resiliency during Houston's summer heat and the occasional hurricane threats. And then that resulting space is really just a beautiful place of natural immersion for the cancer patients and their families that can be enjoyed year round. So that was the party that I'm referring to.
Great. So the next measure is design for equitable communities. Some questions you might ask yourself as you're working through this is, what is the project's greater reach? How could this project contribute to creating a diverse, accessible, walkable, just and human scaled economy, human scaled community? Who might this project be forgetting, and how could we include them? That kind of thing. So the example off to the right here is the 6 by Brooks Scarpa. And this one is located in Los Angeles. And it has a central courtyard that allows for all the units to open up to the center rather than a dual corridor. And the site and building are designed to support and provide public spaces for socializing.
So while this measure can sometimes address getting input from community stakeholders, in this case with Hope Lodge, the American Cancer Society has already built over 30 of these lodges. So they already have a wealth of feedback from building occupants and cancer patients. So this project actually addresses the community kind of beyond that local area, and it requires patients to have traveled from more than 40 miles away to stay for free at the lodge while undergoing treatment. But that's regardless of race, sex, socioeconomic status, et cetera. So the Common App asks you to describe how the social, cultural, and economic impacts meet the needs of the community, and it asks for specific metrics. And so what I entered was that every year, more than 127,000 cancer patients travel to Houston seeking life-saving treatment, oftentimes at MD Anderson. The 64-room facility will save cancer patients an estimated $3 million annually in lodging expenses. Some patients spend days, weeks, even months away from home. And the emotional and financial toll of the loss of income, medical bills, lodging, and dining out can be staggering. So was very specific in entering metrics to show how it supports the community. And then just a note here about the kitchens that I'm showing. So that the kitchens were designed so that the cancer patients and caregivers that are coming together in this kitchen, you know, I mentioned before that they're sharing their common cancer journey with each other. And we would have loved to, you know, have captured this through our photography. However, the construction finished during the height of COVID. And so ACS made the decision to postpone occupancy because of the compromised nature of the guests staying there. But really the communal kitchen is all about community and that sharing that common bond. And this is an image of the guest room. And so we designed every guest room to be wheelchair accessible for maneuvering. You know, it wasn't required by task that every single space be wheelchair maneuverable. And it wasn't required by program, but we just made the decision as a design team to accommodate every single guest kind of equally, since we knew that there would be a large percentage of people that may be coming here that, you know, needed that accessibility. So that's another example of designing for community or equitable community. This is an image of the bedroom. And you can see that there's a bed for the caregiver and the cancer patient.
Nice. The third measure is design for ecosystems. And the idea behind that is that good design mutually benefits both humans and non-humans. Some things you could do, of course, is to avoid all decorative and turf grass. I think they mean mostly like sod, and create natural nighttime habitat conditions, that kind of thing. And this is an example of the Georgia Tech engineered biosystems by Lake Flato and Cooper Carr. The biosystems building took what was previously an underutilized gray field and established ecology as the centerpiece for this new district on campus.
So this site for Hope Lodge is an urban environment, and it was a previously developed site. So again, we worked extensively with Hawker, our landscape architect, to specify the native and adaptive plant species. And we wanted to make sure that we were providing a habitat for the local fauna and pollinators. The bamboo that you can see here actually, you know, provides a veiled view through that ground level. As I mentioned, all the program is kind of on the perimeter of that ground level. And so this really provides a really nice connection from the interior to the ecosystem outside, but it also helps to protect birds from flying into the glass. And then the native and adaptive landscape is very resilient in the extreme heat of Houston with the hurricane threats. And we made sure to specify all low SRI hardscape to reduce heat island effect. And then you know, you can see here that it's just like a really beautiful place for the cancer patients to immerse themselves in nature.
And then number 4 is water. I think that one's pretty self-explanatory. This is one of the ones that does have a calculation. So you're just benchmarking your indoor use and comparing it with the anticipated use. The goal would also be to eliminate outdoor water use as much as possible and to manage stormwater. And the example here is the Marine Education Center, again by Lake Flato in Mississippi. And they reuse and they capture all the rainwater from the roofs, which goes into a cistern and is reused to flush toilets. And also all of the landscape plantings are 100% native. It says not just to the south, but to that specific ecosystem for that microclimate.
I think these are some pretty straightforward sustainability measures. For Hope Lodge, we evaluated the amount of stormwater that would need to be detained on site, and then we made the decision to manage it on site underneath our parking rather than to create a detention pond that actually allowed us to purchase less property for the project. And you know, basic straightforward sustainability measures such as low flow fixtures allowed us to meet the 40% reduction beyond code. And something I think is worth pointing out is one area that we decided against the extremely low flow fixtures was in the showers. So we actually received the samples of the fixtures and of the shower heads, and then we installed them in our home showers, and then we tested it out. And the low flow, ultra low flow fixtures were like pretty weak for a shower. So we decided against it because we wanted cancer patients to kind of feel really comfortable after long days of having radiation and chemotherapy. So as in terms of the landscaping, the drip irrigation system was designed with efficiency in mind to minimize water usage and evapotranspiration. And that generated a 50% reduction in the irrigation demand. And it also allowed us, to help with that initial plant establishment, and then make sure that we had enough water during those stretches of drought that are prevalent here in Texas. And so what you're seeing in this image here is actually some water testing that we had done on site. And we hired an industrial hygienist. They took samples of the water, and then we discovered a lot of refinery related contaminants such as benzene and vinyl chloride. As you can imagine, with it being in Houston, there were a lot of those oil refinement contaminants. And so we decided to use point of use filtration. But we did some similar testing on another project, and it led to the use of reverse osmosis. But in this particular project, we only needed to use the point of use filtration. And that allowed us to remove those harmful toxicants from the water that obviously immune compromised people would be drinking. Not that anybody wants to drink contaminated water, but we also prepared plumbing guidelines for infection control because American Cancer Society was really concerned with making sure we controlled Legionella. So those are some of the water measures we took.
Tori, just to add on to what you were saying about, I think that's a good point about how you decided maybe not to do the low flow fixtures for the showers, because all of this is a balance. I mean, not every project's going to be 100% water, net water zero or net zero energy, that kind of thing. So we're always making design choices and sustainable choices together as part of the overall experience for that client. And that's what I like about the top 10, I mean, the measures for framework. It's a balance, and we're kind of working on a holistic scale. So just thanks for that.
Agreed.
Measure 5 is design for economy, and this one can be looked at in a number of ways. So it's not just how can you save the owner money? It's kind of like, could you possibly use an existing building, or could you appropriately size the program to a more efficient square footage? Or could you bring the corridors to the outside so that you're not having to condition those? How can the performance of this project be improved in ways that are cost and design neutral? The example in the corner, the architects looked at adding revenue generating spaces within that library as one way to design for economy. And another project on the website is a high school in Kenya by BNIM, and they looked at long-term benefits leading to decisions such as purchasing a brick machine so that the local laborers could make high quality bricks. So all of that to say is this could be a number of things. It's really just economy as a whole. How does that benefit?
Oops. Oh, shoot. Okay. I think this is another good example of balance for us. So we performed numerous studies. In the beginning, it especially started with just right sizing the land acquisition. Since it's a nonprofit organization, like I mentioned, we were evaluating whether or not it was more cost effective to purchase a smaller tract of land and do underground detention, or to purchase a larger tract and do a detention pond. And so for that exercise, we work with Construction Eco Services to price the underground detention. And that was ultimately more cost effective for American Cancer Society. And then to find the right balance between the high density program, like I mentioned, it was the largest of all Hope Lodges. So we studied a singular tower scheme, but then we opted to create a more human scale project by going to a 2-tower scheme, which is not as economical, but this process led to the creation of the scheme that flanked the central healing garden, which allowed us to turn the user's focus inward. So I think that's another good example of just balancing priorities. And then throughout the design process, we analyzed how the impact of the sun and the wind, especially on that central healing garden, would allow us to kind of justify the cost of the trellis to create a microclimate that really helped the healing garden to become a space that was more usable in the Texas heat. So like I mentioned, it's all about weighing the different attributes or priorities for the client to create ultimately what's most important for the client. And another point on this is regarding the fact that ACS is a nonprofit organization. And so ultimately something that was very important to them was for us to be good stewards of the donor money. The entire project was funded by donors. And so every decision made on the project was a balance of creating a home-like environment, but also communicating to donors that the money was spent on like really smart and timeless material choices. And so we let nature do a lot of the work for us. And then we use the nicer, more upscale finishes strategically in the more public areas.
Measure 6 is more straightforward. Of course, it's energy. It is one of the other areas where you're actually doing a calculation of setting the benchmark and then establishing your EUI, your energy use intensity goal, and then showing how you're meeting that with, if you modeled the project, showing how your anticipated use, or if you have actual data to show your actual energy use. I think the goal here would be to, of course, design for climate passive strategies first and model the project if you can, but it's not a requirement. And this is a house designed by Olsen Kundig, and it uses thermal mass and natural ventilation to reduce the energy needs for the home.
So the energy savings at Pope Lodge can be attributed to an optimized building envelope that is well insulated with really good glazing protected against solar heat gain. And so you can see here that we didn't really go crazy with glazing on this project. We concentrated the majority of glazing at the public spaces. And then we engaged in energy modeling in order to meet the 2030 challenge. So our energy use reduction is 72% against CBEC's 2003, which is what the 2030 commitment is measured against. And so I find a lot of designers get confused about the benchmark, and the Common App specifically has you enter which energy code you were under for your project. But I think it's also really important to understand how your building performs against CBEC's 2003. Like I said, that's what the 2030 commitment is measured against. And then we also were able to achieve energy savings through highly optimized mechanical systems, including high efficiency VRF units in each guest suite that are individually controlled for thermal comfort. And the building's lighting use was aggressively dropped by nearly half the average by using daylight harvesting and highly efficient LED fixtures, which you almost have to do to meet energy code anyways. But you can see in the image, just how much of the daylight enters the space. Unfortunately, we're unable to measure the actual energy performance because, like I mentioned, the building construction finished at the height of COVID, and the building hasn't really operated yet just as intended. So I actually just collected utility bills from the client last week so that I could kind of gauge how we performed against our design. And again, the amount of ambient light entering the spaces allows us to really just keep the lights off a lot of the time, which makes it a really nice space to be in.
Measure 7 is design for well-being. The idea of good design supports health and well-being for all the people, considering all the different physical, mental, emotional effects on a building. So some things you could do, if you could only do a couple of things, is give the occupants individual control over their immediate environment, and or design for biophilic elements, bringing that in, thinking about acoustics and a plan for achieving that. And of course, you could also be thinking about material health, which I'm sure Tori is going to expand upon, as that is her kind of expertise. This example here is the Candida building in Atlanta, so another hot and humid climate. And this building is, if it's not already, it's soon to be living building challenge certified, which means it'll be net zero energy, net zero water, and a very healthy interior.
So I think it's pretty clear. I've already touched a lot on well-being with this building, but we really took the synergies between the well building standard and the LEED rating system to support ACS's mission to help cancer patients stay well and get well, which is literally verbatim their mission statement. Physical health is like obviously a big impact for one's mental health and stress levels. And then, as I have mentioned many times, the design focused on wellness through the biophilic connection to the healing garden. We've got this fitness room. This is the meditation space I had mentioned earlier on, and just the mix of private and communal spaces, a library to make cancer resources available to cancer patients, the ease of access to treatment, and all of this being done free of charge. Really just, that reduced financial burden. It provides guests less stress and allows them to develop that camaraderie that's so important in cancer care. So I think that this one was very easy for us just due to the nature of the project and the program. And as I had mentioned earlier about the communal space of the kitchen. But something I wanted to talk about a little bit further was just providing spaces for guests with compromised immune systems and those particularly that are susceptible to lung infections. So we focused on optimal air quality and reducing the entrance of toxicants into the interior space. And so on our mechanical units, we use really aggressive air filtration measures to remove those various size air particulates. We installed UV filters on the air condensing units to reduce the risk of the harmful bacteria growth. We use walk-off mats at all the entrances to reduce the outdoor debris coming into the space, and place dedicated exhaust on all spaces that could jeopardize air quality. And then we tested the quality of the air before any guests arrived, and then flushed out any remaining impurities. As Beth mentioned, material health is like really my sweet spot. I'm very passionate about it, and I learned a lot about it through working on this project. So we utilize resources such as Perkins & Will's transparency website, the Mindful Materials database, the HPDC repository, ILFI's Declare website, Healthy Building Network, and many others. And through that, over 50 different building materials were evaluated to understand what their emissions were and their material makeup. And thereby we were able to avoid those like harmful toxicants that are prevalent in building materials. And so this analysis that we did has led to a really well curated library of materials that other Hope Lodge facilities can benefit from for years to come. And we did this even with the furniture. So as you can imagine, when we did the air quality testing before occupants moved in, the air quality was just like really perfect and great. And we didn't have to flush out much. So it was pretty eye-opening to go through that entire process.
Kind of closely connected to that is measure 8, design for resources. Again, good design depends on informed material selection, balancing those priorities that we've been talking about to achieve a durable and safe project. So looking at choosing So there's a couple things. Choose one or a few chemicals of concern. I think that means like trying to eliminate some of those. Choose a few to look at and make sure that they're eliminated from your project. Can you reuse a building? And then looking at products that already have a low embodied carbon. And again, like Tori was just talking about, let's look at materials that are EPD, HBD, declare labels. Declare is super easy, you guys. If you don't know anything, just look at declare, and that's under the ILFI, International Living Future Institute's website. And there's a lot more. This example off to the side is an adaptive reuse project in San Antonio.
So you're not really intended to be able to read this Excel file. I just put it in here to give an example of how, we were able to track the different well building standard features. And we specifically looked at enhanced material precaution and material transparency features in the well building standard. So, this is a snippet of our handy Excel spreadsheet where we tracked all of the building materials and how we were able to contribute to those features. And so you can see the items shaded in green basically means we achieved it. So it was a lot easier to achieve the material transparency feature than the enhanced material precaution feature. But having this spreadsheet allowed us to be accountable to our decisions for, designing for health through the entire life of the project, and especially through CA as we were evaluating substitutions that were presented to us by the contractor. And again, I mentioned using materials strategically. So on the ground floor, public spaces are where we use the more upscale materials, and then upstairs materials were used a little bit more sparingly, letting nature do the work for us. And then just to give you an idea of how the well building standard material features translated to our design, our real wood flooring used this water-based finish in lieu of an oil-based finish, which has higher VOC emissions. All metal coil products such as the curtain wall and our entry metal panels use a PVDF coating. They avoided the PVDF coating, and we used a healthier alternative. We worked with the contractor on the wood slat wall that you can kind of see a little off to the right there. And we ensured that no halogenated flame retardants were used in the wood slat wall. The quartz on the reception desk, we used a non-toxic binder that is unlike many quartz surface products on the market. And as I mentioned, we even evaluated all of the furniture to ensure that the pieces were meeting the ANSI BIFMA furniture sustainability standards. And like I said, when we got our air quality test results back there, the air quality was great.
And we want to leave time for questions. So we're just kind of going to go through these last two pretty quickly.
Yeah, I just have two more.
See, design for change could be a different thing. Some of the focus topics is resilient design, flexibility and adaptability in the future, and then also passive survivability and livability. So if the power went out, could you stay in that building, or would it be just too hot to even be in, that kind of thing?
So we utilize the RELI rating system guidelines, which I just put a screenshot of the standard there. The lodge address the strategies. They use these strategies essentially to help occupants feel safe in any kind of storm surge. As you know, that severe storms and blackouts are not uncommon in Houston. So we installed backup generators, and we created space for on-site dry goods storage so that the guests could ride out the storms without fear of losing like any daily necessities. Restrooms we placed on the inner core in case they needed to shelter in place. As you all probably very well remember, Houston is prone to flooding. So then, as I mentioned previously, we designed to absorb the stormwater through the underground detention system beneath the parking lot And we oversized our roof drains for estimated future rainfall instead of current rainfall.
Great. And the last item is design for discovery. So again, this could be looked at in different ways. One would be finding out later on, the actual EUI. The other could be post-occupancy evaluations and trying to understand from that. Another one could be lessons learned and things that you could do differently next time. And another one could just be discovery and delight. What is about this space that promotes a sense of discovery?
So this is my last point. As I mentioned, the Hope Lodge, this is a different project, by the way, but the Hope Lodge suspended operations because of COVID, and instead they were able to offer the lodge's free temporary housing for healthcare workers that were unable to return home, during COVID. So I guess my point here was showing this project. This is the Hope Lodge in Dallas. And we were actually able to take a lot of the lessons learned from Hope Lodge Houston and implement them into our design on the next project we worked on, which was Hope Lodge Dallas. And so I think that's just an important point to make, that although we couldn't evaluate how the building was being utilized, whether or not it was utilized as intended or taking post-occupancy surveys, we were able to take what we learned and apply it to a future project. And so that was the point that we made in our submittal for the Common App. And that was my last point on Hope Lodge.
Story. This is just saying that there's a ton of resources available out there for you all. Again, look at the AI Dallas, AI Dallas Design Awards website, download the Common App, which is basically an Excel sheet, which Tori's going to pull up now. And we're going to run through that fairly quickly. In case we run out of time, I also just wanted to point out the other video on the website is recorded by AIA San Antonio, and they go through this actual spreadsheet in really a lot of detail. So that would be good to look at too.
This is the spider graph I was talking about. So as I had mentioned, it appears that we're performing very poorly on measured energy. So if I had changed my inputs down below on measured energy, then this white line might come out a little bit further. But since we were unable to actually measure the energy, it's here in the center. But I just explained that in the app. And as I mentioned, wellness was a high priority, as well as water and energy. So you can see that those white lines come out further on the spider graph. And I don't know if there was something in particular you wanted to touch on, Beth, but you
Sure.
do.
Well, the first part is project information. Again, the app makes it sound really fancy. Maybe someday it will be an actual app, but for right now, it's an Excel spreadsheet. So everything in gray is a place to fill out. And then if you see the blue, that's a link, and it takes you straight to what so if you don't know your climate zone, it takes you to the map so you can fill in your climate zone. And there's pull downs in a lot of these, which give you options. Do you want to, yeah, there you go. So this one just asks, and most of this is pretty self-explanatory, but let me know if you have questions. Is this going for a third-party certification? Your overall annual use of operation and peak occupancy. Sometimes on this one, do the very best you can. A lot of it's based around LEED kind of stuff, but if you're not familiar with LEED, again, just do the best you can, fill out everything just to the best that you can. And then for a lot of these measures one, you'll see that they're narratives and statements. And there's max 500 word max, that kind of thing. And it tells you off to the side what they're asking of you.
What I've found most helpful with the 500 word max text length is to actually write my narratives in a Word document and then discuss them with whoever you need to discuss them with for revisions. If you need to talk it over with the design director or whatnot, do that all in a Word doc and make sure that you're staying within that 500 word max, and then copy paste into the Excel file when you're done. And then again, a lot of these are drop down menus. Of course,
Yeah.
that one. There you
A
go.
lot of it is the yes or no questions. And, obviously just be honest. We're not trying to game the system here. It's just, what is your walk score? Okay. If you don't know what a walk score is, you can click on the link. You type in where your project is, and that will tell you how walkable your project is in that neighborhood.
It's pretty straightforward.
Yeah. Has anybody downloaded this, or do they have any questions so far?
Like this field here is an actual formula that's already in the spreadsheet to give you your square foot per occupant, because you've already entered those values.
Right.
This is where you're entering what building code you're under. And then, whether you energy modeled or just did a com check. And like I said, here was actual energy measured. No, had to answer that with a no. And then I did explain that elsewhere in the spreadsheet. I know that I fixed this before the submission, so not sure why it's giving me an error today, but.
So the white boxes, Tori made a good point. The gray boxes are things to fill out or to do the drop down. And if you see a white box, don't mess with it, because it means it's auto calculating it from something else. Jess had a good question. Is this applicable for commercial and residential? This is applicable for all types of projects. And if you scroll up to the top, it asks you what's the project use type. And so you can do a combination. It says, like, if it's new construction, you have that drop down, right? Project type. If it's just interiors or renovation or new construction, and then there's another area within the project as to what it's used for. So residential, commercial, all of the above.
I find this like a very valuable tool to use throughout the design process, obviously not just when you're submitting for an award.
And some questions I've had posed to me in the past is, how do the jurors use this? Are they doing some kind of calculation and deciding who wins? No, this is just one more thing that they can look at when they're evaluating the project. So a lot of them sometimes just look quickly at the spider graph to see how it's performing. And then if it came down to where they're trying to narrow it down, they may look at the Common App in more detail at that point. We're really not sure exactly how the jurors use this. Just think of it as another piece of information.
I wouldn't worry too much if your spider graph is, showing a lack of performance in one area. Clearly I had this one here in the center and the project still won an award. I was just looking in the chat to see if there were any other questions.
And if you want, at this point, I think if you want to unmute, you can.
Yeah, I have a question. How do the narratives get scored?
I think I have that same question, Robert. So Tori, from filling it in, do you know, like, does it just check that box? If you filled it in, then it kind of, or is it the longer you type, the more you?
No, so obviously this is just my opinion, but I've been told by others that have more experience with design awards that you need to be able to succinctly describe your project. So it doesn't really matter if you go to the 500 word max, they're reviewing a lot of submissions. So I think more importantly is to be able to describe your project in a way that really explains it very well and why you think it is worthy of a design award. So, the goal is not to just meet the word limit. I think that you need to be addressing all of the measures. And if there's a particular reason why you haven't addressed a measure, like explain that.
And Tori, if you want to pull the spreadsheet back up for a second,
Yeah,
it kind of explains off to the side what they're asking you to talk about for each narrative.
can you see that?
Mhm.
Yeah, so down here it tells you.
Or each statement, I should say. Yeah.
Yeah, but what I found more useful was actually the AIA design framework
The
online.
website. Okay.
Yeah. And I just made sure that my narrative kind of addressed all of the points made, or, you know, some of the points made on the AIA website.
Great.
I'm not gonna lie, it is a lot of work. But it's much easier if your project is well designed.
And I think it depends, like this project was going through a lot of detailed goals for the specific project itself, not just for the Common App, right?
Right.
So I was working on a project last year, and we're going to resubmit it again this year. And it's the first time I'd really gone through the Common App in detail. And again, just being pretty transparent of where I was on that, or where we were at that time on the project. Did we have actual energy data? No, not yet. That kind of thing. So.
Another question, does this Common App favor some building types over others, such as single family residential over single family residential? Just curious.
I think it's very scalable. You know, each of these measures, they may seem kind of grandiose for like large project types, but I think that they can be very applicable to any project type at any scale.
Mm-hmm.
Just the way you describe how you're meeting those measures. You know, if you're talking about a residence and you didn't involve the community in the design, you know, there's a way to explain that.
Yeah, and that's a good question as well, Robert. I mean, I think I'm on the subcommittee for the Common App for AI National COTE, where we're evaluating that kind of stuff each year, and we're making improvements to the Common App over time. One feedback was about adaptive reuse and historic type projects, and so I think they're working on including that as another measure, not as another measure, but as a way to kind of, does that count more or what have you in the spider graphic. But overall, like Tori said, it's very scalable to definitely for residential to large scale commercial.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Beth, but I know when I was going through this in the past, you told me to email you with any feedback I had on how to improve.
Yes. Yes, I'm still taking feedback and kind of taking that up the line to national. So they're going to keep doing updates every year.
Did that answer all the questions? So, I mean, you guys can feel free to shoot me an email if you want to know something more specific. I can put my email in the chat here.
Well, thank you guys.
Hey, thank you all. This was really helpful.